What's up, everybody? Today is Thursday, February 8th. Hard to believe the first week of February is already come and gone. You're tuning in. It's our 2 cents. Chris Dobson, Gerry Green. Gerry, we have got a banger of a show today. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to start, of course, and the bulk of it, unlike where we usually start with the QMJHL, we're actually going to be talking about the Super Bowl because it is coming up this Sunday. It only makes sense. Before we dive into the Super Bowl, though, I want to go down not even necessarily memory lane, but I want to talk about how we got to where we are. We had the NFC Championship, the AFC Championship. In the Super Bowl, of course, we've got the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes looking to do something that only a couple in his previous time have done the way he's done it. He's already being discussed as GOAT potential category. I think it's still a little too premature, but it's tough to at least not put him in the conversation. But Gerry, what are your thoughts on the Super Bowl potential matchup? But before we get there, let's talk about the two games that led us to what we're about to see here on Sunday.
Well, what impressed me about Kansas City's road there is that they had to do it on the road and not in two easy places either. They had to go to Buffalo, and then they had to go to Baltimore. And Baltimore was heavily favored in regards to having Kansas City come in there and play them, and all rested and ready to go. And what happens is, I don't know. Baltimore certainly does not follow the recipe that got them there in regards to running the ball. They talk about how Baltimore, not only Lamar Jackson running the ball, but the rest of the running backs running the ball, because it was noted Kansas City was 24th in defense in the rush during the regular season in the NFL. But they wanted to continually try to throw the ball. Lamar Jackson had 8 rushes for 54 yards in the game.
Foolish.
He threw for some yards, and he threw for almost 4,000 during the regular season and ran for 821 during the regular season. I just don't know where that part of their game plan gets thrown in the trash can, and let's throw it, and it played right into the hands of Kansas City in regards to that game.
You look at how the whole thing ran in Kansas City. Let's go back a week before that when they had the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. They allowed Josh Allen to run 72 yards against that defense. And you're going to tell me Lamar Jackson's in there, arguably the greatest scrambling running QB in the game. And he runs for, what did you say the stat line was officially? What was it?
8 rushes for 54 yards.
Right, 54 yards for Lamar Jackson. I had him pegged to rush over 100 yards this game. Figured if they allowed Josh Allen to do it, he was breaking 100. But again, they didn't do it. And I'm not taking away from Kansas City. Their defense stepped up when it had to. They stopped the rush when they needed to. They stopped. I don't know. I don't like the way that game ended. Not as bad as the NFC piece, which we'll talk about in a minute. But at the same time, I look at it and go, okay, I thought this was going to be Lamar's turn. I thought he was going to do it. I saw a little bit of a heated exchange between Odell Beckham and Lamar Jackson on the side. OBJ was telling him, hey, do what you do. Put this team on your back and run the ball. And he still didn't do it. So anyways, I do feel bad for Ravens fans because they had every opportunity to get there and dethrone this Kansas City Chiefs. Now, what's crazy about the Chiefs, Gerry, go back to the regular season, the last couple weeks going into the playoffs. And I hope our producer doesn't cut us off here when I say this. But, we'll say midway through the season, 2/3 of the way through the season, Kansas City didn't look like the Kansas City Chiefs team we're used to seeing. Every possession, Travis Kelce was getting double teamed. Postseason started, props to Travis Kelce. He always finds a way to get open. He was going in multiple touchdowns a game. But overall, when you look at how that whole thing ran down, the fact that Kansas City is where they are just goes to show that you better put some respect on Patrick Mahomes' name now. I mean, not that he wasn't great before, but...
And Chris, I think it was as much Baltimore's fault for losing the game as it was the way Kansas City played, because they took 8 penalties, of which 3 of them were personal, and they turned over the ball, especially the one at the goal line. So I think it was just as much Baltimore handing it to Kansas City as Kansas City did winning it. So that was the
penalty,
point
and
of view there.
And then that fumble. Just ridiculous and foolish. And I agree with you. I think, if you were to ask anybody, the question would be, again, not to take away from the Chiefs, but did the Ravens lose or did the Chiefs win? And the answer is yes, of course it is. But anybody who knows football knows the Ravens lost that game. Let's talk about the NFC. I want to get your thought there because this one hurts. This one hurt my heart just a little
Terribly.
bit.
Terribly, Chris, and especially because I was at an event, and so I taped the game, was able to avoid anybody telling me what the score was or how the game was going, because I got home before the game was over, but I started the game from the PVR, and I think 24-7. What is going on here? And Detroit was doing everything that got them there. They were running the ball, they were throwing the ball, they were keeping San Francisco off balance, they were keeping San Francisco offense off the field, because when you run the ball, the clock runs, Chris, and it's a fine art to do it, and clock and the time ticks down, and so that doesn't allow the other team to get on the field. But a couple of thoughts by the head coach and a couple of misplays by the Lions to start the second half, and the thing just unravels right in front of your eyes.
How do you not take the points? When you're up that way, they come down, they score that field goal, you go down, and again, you try to extend the drive, take the 3 points, make it another 3-score game, take the wind out of the sails of the fan. You allowed the Niners fans and Niners faithful to get back into that ball game. And what happened after that? No, don't get me wrong. The fumble after that, everything fell apart from that point on. But in any opportunity, and again, all the media reports showed exactly, hey, they went to the formula that got them to where they were. They didn't move away from that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you have to use your head and say, okay, we want to go to the Super Bowl. Fans need us to get there. Take the damn points. Period.
Well, the second half started like this, Chris, and just to capsulize it a little bit. San Francisco has the ball to start the second half. Detroit has momentum by stopping San Francisco to just a field goal to start the second half. And then they start marching down the field, do the Lions in the exact same way they did in the first half, but then decide not to go to that field goal. So they don't get the field goal. You stop them on a fourth down, gives San Francisco the momentum again, and back it swung. But you must give credit, and the discussion was always about Brock Purdy and could he guide them? Certainly not in the first half he did it. And the way he did it in the second half was by running the ball. He had two 20-yard, over 20-yard rushes that were in key situations when it looked like Detroit had them third and long, and he ran for 20 yards. Matter of fact, we mentioned Lamar Jackson had 54 yards. Purdy had 5 carries for 48 yards. I think an underrated statistic, because there was a key times in that game that he breaks loose on third downs. Those are third down rushes too. And he only had, Chris, 144 yards rushing during the regular season. What does he do in the championship game? He gets 48. Yes.
Don't even mention that Brandon Ayuk catch at the other side. Now, again, it would have been pass interference regardless, but him going downfield and getting that ridiculous catch to march on him was also phenomenal. Look, your pup, exactly. He agrees with me, Jerry. He's right on it. He feels. But overall, I like the, like I said, it is what it is, whether I love it or I hate it. I feel bad for Lions fans, but we've got the Niners, we've got the Chiefs, and we've got the Super Bowl on Sunday. So looking at these two teams, the comparison matchup, and I'm sure you've got the numbers in front of you. You usually do. What are we dealing with here? What can we expect to see? I mean, it's not going to be a cakewalk for Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and those Niners. I don't think so. I actually think the Chiefs are going to pull this off.
Again, I like the fact that the Chiefs have been away from home. They've been away from home for the last 2 games, and they're going to for the championship game, of course, which is going to be in Las Vegas. So here you are. I think they have all the momentum because they've been able to know how to play away from home, and I think they have it figured out defensively what they need to do and what they can force the opposition to do. San Francisco's been comfy and warm at 2 games at home against Green Bay and against Detroit. And here's Kansas City going up against a couple of pretty good opponents that could be in the Super Bowl themselves. I just think they're more prepared than San Francisco is for the bright lights of Las Vegas.
I fully agree with you. And I know that our producer, Jay, is not going to love me calling out Kansas City to win this game because every time I bet against them, they won. So he probably thinks I'm the jinx that's going to ruin them the Super Bowl. But I genuinely believe, like you said, look, Kelsey's on another level right now. Pacheco's running the ball very well right now. Patrick Mahomes looks good. The defense looks good. I think they're coming on in. And when was the last time you could look at the Chiefs and everyone looked at them and said they're the underdog? Hasn't happened in a long time. And they're embracing that role to a T. And I don't think it's as lopsided as people seem to think it is. And yeah, I'm with you. I think the Chiefs are going to be more prepared, more ready, and I think Coach Reid's going to have these guys ready to go. And I think you're about to see Mahomes lift himself another Super Bowl.
But the other part, Chris, is if San Francisco could stick to a game plan of running the ball, like I say, Baltimore should have done it against KC because of their rush defense, and they've got McCaffrey, and they've got some Deebo Samuels back there too that can run the ball and catch the ball, and have Purdy just manage the game. I think it's a possibility, and maybe Purdy will run the ball too. It's a total guess, Chris, on who's going to have what type of momentum, and it's going to be fun to watch. Two good teams that deserve to be there, and I like the fact it's a 7:30 start on Sunday, so you don't have to be in the middle of your day to watch this game. It's usually not over till midnight anyways after the halftime show and all that kind of stuff. So are you interested in the halftime show, Chris? Usher's going to be there. A little flashback from your past, or were you Usher fan or what?
Takes me back to 98, bud, right in the Moncton High School hallways. That's what we'll say. But look, I think I'm more of a rock and roll guy. I mean, I get why they're bringing these guys into it. I look back. In fact, I was watching some of the old Super Bowl halftime shows the other day, and I think probably to this day, my favorite one was Prince. I loved the Prince halftime show. I thought it was phenomenal. Always loved the Michael Jackson halftime show. Dr. Dre and Eminem, probably from a current era, is probably my favorite recently. But overall, look, you're bringing Usher in. He's going to bring in some guests with him. I always look forward to the halftime show. I mean, it's never a bad time, right? I mean,
no.
At the end of the day, it is. But other than that, yeah, I don't know. What about you? Are you looking forward to it?
No, it doesn't interest me. I don't need to see the pregame shows for 6 hours. I don't need to. I'm not interested in the background. I've seen the background all season long about these two teams and what kind of interesting stories that the ESPN or whoever it might be that's covering them might come up with. I don't need that. I do like to know predictions from some of these so-called experts, and I've seen it all season long. And again, I said this to you all season long when it comes to betting, of which there's going to be a lot on this game, billions of dollars bet on this game. You can't rely on so-called experts to come up with the right answer, because I've seen it all season long. I hated to have been betting on any game in the NFL this season. And then you start to think about, Chris, well, how much can betting actually influence the game? Maybe it can. Who knows?
Yeah, you're right. Now that betting's legal, it's actually interesting to see how all these numbers are starting to come out. But I agree with you. Anyways, let's move on, Gerry, because I want to talk about the National Hockey League for a bit, because I agree with you. I think we're both in agreement. We think Kansas City, we're both rooting on the Chiefs to win this game. All right, let's move on. Kansas City, the NHL. Talk about, unfortunately, the Oilers snapped. The streak is over, Gerry. 16 games, lost to the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Sad to see. Connor McDavid looked frustrated when that game was over. But at the end of the day, all good things must come to an end. I just wish they would have gotten 2 more games out of it.
Well, Chris, I was determined to stay up and watch. And if you wanted to see an excellent hockey game with two teams that were playing with a tremendous amount of intensity, a tremendous amount of heart, a tremendous amount of energy, it was pure playoff hockey, Chris, and it was so good. Vegas and Edmonton were going toe-to-toe in a close checking, low-scoring type of game. My goodness, I'm glad I stayed up. It was till 1:30 to watch that game because I wanted to see if the Oilers were going to do it. And what it did prove to me, Chris, is the Oilers are for real. And know what who they're giving credit to is to Paul Coffey. Paul Coffey came in with Knobloch, and I guess he's stabilized the defense a little bit, or maybe showed them how to play a little offense and defense at the same time. But he's getting a whole lot of credit, Chris. And watching the game, Aiden Hill is the goaltender for Las Vegas. You don't know much about him. He was mentioned this week in regards to a possible International Cup event. Who does Canada have for a goaltender? Aiden Hill was dropped in. Do you know anything about him, Chris? Well, I'll tell you this. He's 13-2-2 this season. He's got a goals against of 1.88. He's got a save percentage of .938. He won a Stanley Cup last year in the nets for Vegas, and during the playoffs, he was 11-4 with just over 2 goals against and a save percentage of .932. I watched him the other night. He's 6'4". He's a big lad that can cover the net. Both goalers, Skinner and Hill, were both excellent. But when it comes to thinking about a Canadian goaltender, I think Aiden Hill's got to be mentioned just by watching that game the other night, which was a thrill.
I agree. Aiden Hill's really starting to make a name for himself. Looked great last season going to that cup run. And then this year, you talk about the numbers that he's putting up. And, overall, if you didn't know who Aiden Hill was before, you certainly do now, and you're taking notice. But overall, I mean, if you look at how it's all going to come and go, I mean, look, if you look at how the Oilers season started and it's compared to where we are today,
yeah,
you couldn't have told me 2.5 months ago or 3 months ago that the Oilers were going to win 16 in a row. I would have told you were a liar. But overall, here we are. Now the Oilers are going to be in that weird phase where we're going to be looking at a trade deadline and how it's going to impact. What kind of moves are they going to make? How are they going to solidify things? Because this is the year. Do not kid yourself. The Oilers are looking to make another run, and they're not going to settle for mediocrity at this point. But overall, it was sad to see, but I loved following the storyline to get us there. But speaking of storylines and Connor McDavid, I want to talk to you about the All-Star game, because the All-Star game came and went. Nikita Kucherov and the star of the All-Star game, I might add. What an absolute clown. I can't even voice my opinion because it irritates me, but I want to get your thoughts on it, because they made adjustments a couple years ago to turn this into a 3-on-3 tournament, which to me personally, I don't hate, but overall it's a 3-on-3 tournament for 2 periods of hockey. I mean, do you like it? Did you like the draft style? Are you okay with this? Did you even watch it?
A little bit, Chris. I was intrigued to find out during All-Star Week, which starts maybe on a Thursday, 2 major trades were made, a coach was fired, and the NHL announces that they're going back to the Olympics. I thought that overshadowed the whole event. I thought the picking of teams was awkward.
What was the major trade?
Well, you had Elias Lindholm go to Vancouver, and of course you had Sean Monahan go to the Winnipeg Jets for a 4th-round pick. How's she going? And the Jets need him because they haven't been scoring goals in the last 5 games, but they're still holding water. And look at what Calgary gets for Lindholm. They get Andrei Kuzmenko, who I think is a fantastic player, and Tocchet didn't seem to like him in Vancouver. And they get this young stud defenseman along with another prospect who's playing in Kitchener this season for the Rangers, Chris, and he's got 69 points in 48 games. So Calgary did very well in Lindholm. That wasn't going to probably sign there, and now Vancouver will have a responsibility to do that. LA lost their coach, and Bettman just casually mentions, oh, yeah, the NHL is going back to the Olympics, which I thought is fantastic for fellows like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, all those younger players that have yet to taste international top-notch action, not junior. I'm talking about professional international play.
Just quickly think about the odds and how great it's going to look to have Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, and Connor McDavid all playing the same hockey team, and at least 2026. 2030 is a stretch. Sid will probably be retired at that point, but you got to think they'll at least give one run out of it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's absolutely exciting to know that the NHL has come up with that agreement with the IOC and the NHLPA, and it's all handled. I mean, go back to 2010 in Vancouver and how fired up everybody was for that and how exciting it was. The whole country united for it. To me, overall, I think it's probably one of the best events. Love that they worked it out. But I do agree with you. I think Bettman overshadowing the entire NHL All-Star game, it's a good and bad thing. And then, of course, the story about the bid coming in for the expansion team as well. Again, all stories, even though they didn't finalize that, but all overshadowing what they were trying to take place in Toronto, which, by the way, I will give Toronto full props to the fan, the support, everything they did, because they put on one hell of an event in Toronto, and everything from the celebrities doing the draft to the coaches to the fans and all the events they had going around the city. Apparently Toronto was the hotbed of the country, and the NHL, they put on a hell of a show. But I agree with you. I think the story's overshadowed.
The other thing from the weekend, Chris, that I thought was very odd was Pebble Beach got canceled. The final round, the 4th round got canceled because of weather. I've never seen that before in my life. And what a fantastic course. And this Waste Management is part of the Super Bowl weekend. The Waste Management tournament, golf tournament in Phoenix is coming up this weekend. And how much do you love the fact that the fans are so involved in Phoenix, and especially on that 16th hole?
Well, I was going to bring it up for anybody who's watching the show who doesn't ever typically take in golf whatsoever. This is the one. This is must watch golf. And of course, everybody who does watch golf knows, but you brought up that 16th hole. That's the one where you see everybody celebrating. They're encouraging the fans to get up. Heaven forbid a hole in one goes in or anything close to that, because then they just pepper you with draft glasses as it's going through on the tee box. I mean, that's what it's like at the Miramichi Golf Club, right? I mean, every time you tee off, they just fire draft cups at you. Yes. Either way, no, the Waste Management Open is going to be absolutely a gem. And for anybody, like I said, if you haven't checked it out, I recommend do it right away. You're not going to be disappointed. Well, that's going to do it. It's been a great show, Gerry. Let's get to the point at the end of the show that everybody loves so much. Let's talk about the Atlantic scene with Green. Gerry, what's happening here in Atlantic Canada on the local scene?
Well, the MHL is close to my heart, Chris, and they lead off the Atlantic scene. Is the schedule very interesting in the north this weekend, as West Kent and the Steamers and the Miramichi Timberwolves are going to play back-to-back. That's not the interesting thing. They're going to play 3 games in a row. They're going to play Friday in Bucktouche. They're going to play Saturday in Miramichi. And then next Friday, they're going to play in Bucktouche with no other games in between. Currently, West Kent's in second place in the north, Timberwolves in third place in the north. So it should be an interesting little mini series over the next week as they play each other 3 times. Meanwhile, in the south, 4 teams, 3 spots, 4 points separate the teams that are vying for the playoffs. It's about 20 games left in the regular schedule. Amherst, Pictou, Truro, and Yarmouth. Summerside sits alone in first place. And interesting, Chris, last week, January 20th, as a matter of fact, the Miramichi Civic Center, their goaltender, Adam Rouleau, got credited with a goal. They were playing the Amherst Ramblers, and in the first period, delayed penalty call was going on. Amherst pulled their goalie, 6 attackers. What did they do? 190 feet down into their own net, and the Miramichi goaltender was the last to touch it. He got credited with his first and only goal, and I don't know how many goalies in the MHL have ever been credited with a goal. The AUS hockey continues this weekend. The regular season does wrap up. UNB and Moncton get byes in the first round. Here's the interesting thing, Chris. UNB has a home game on Friday, their last game of the regular season. Currently, they're 29-0. They could go 30-0, never been done in the AUS. Not 30-0, maybe 24-0. Maybe I don't think it's ever been done. Talking to my crack research staff who dug into this today, but it is true that in 72-73, Claire Drake. Remember that name in university hockey? He was coaching the University of Toronto Varsity Blues. They went undefeated that season, not only during the regular season, but into the playoffs, and they did win the Canadian Championship. But no AUS team has ever gone undefeated. And you know who's behind the helm there? Gardner McDougall, who this week was acknowledged for over 600 victories, playoff and regular season, as coach at UNB. And Chris, do you remember, of course, he was a Memorial Cup champion as well, as he guided the St. John Sea Dogs just a couple seasons ago. AUS women, well, they wrap up their regular season this weekend. UNB and St. FX are battling at the top. Both of them had 3 games left. Both of them have byes in the first round. Moncton, St. Mary's, St. Thomas, and Dalhousie have also qualified for the women in AUS hockey. AUS curling champions, Chris. Curling season is among us. I love it. And it's in PEI. It happens this weekend. Dalhousie is favored in both women and men's events. They're the ones to beat in PEI this weekend. And we can't forget about the Q, Chris. We didn't talk about them much during the regular show, but Moncton's on the road in Baie-Comeau against the first-ranked Baie-Comeau Drakkar. They're in Drummondville to take on the Voltigeurs. Voltigeurs are second overall, and they play in Chicoutimi. Tough road trip for the Moncton Wildcats, who currently 6-6 overall in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. St. John's fighting for a playoff spot, Chris. They're in Halifax, and they play in Charlottetown this weekend. And number 10 in the league, the Acadie Bathurst Titans, are on the road as well. They play in the far reaches of Quebec in Rouyn-Noranda and Val-d'Or this weekend. There's your update, Chris. Now, why don't you tell me your 2 cents?
All right, and we're going to stop someplace that's near and dear to my heart. I've been excited to talk about this all day, and that is, of course, myself and every other Red Sox fan on the planet can rejoice and be thrilled because Theo Epstein's back with the organization. You know, if people who remember, he's the architect to the 2 World Series championship teams in Boston but he's joining the Fenway Sports Group as a senior advisor and part owner. Look, at the end of the day, for people who don't know, Epstein served as a consultant for Major League Baseball since 2021 after leaving the Red Sox. Now he's going to advise Fenway Sports Group owners John Henry, Tom Werner, Mike Gordon, and Sam Kennedy on the company's sporting operations across the portfolio and consult on strategic growth and investment. He won't be making personnel decisions. This is important. However, don't think for 2 seconds his voice isn't going to carry enormous weight around there, because with everything happening and, of course, every team getting better outside of the LA Dodgers, the AL East is kind of the one spot everyone questions. And the Yankees got better. Red Sox aren't going to be that great. But now that Epstein's back somewhere within the organization, don't think for 2 seconds he's not going to be, he might just throw a couple little tidbits of information, or they're certainly going to go to him for a little bit of advice. But either way, my 2 cents on the whole subject is I am thrilled to have him back within the organization. He is a welcome sight. He's a welcome addition to the Fenway Sports Group. Thrilled to have him there. That's my 2 cents, Gerry. Let's hear yours, and let's close this thing off.
Well, Chris, this is a three-pronged attack at the National Basketball Association, or which I like to call the No Defense Association. Call them the NBA, not the NBA, because there's no defense being played in the NBA these days. Just in the last couple of weeks, Chris, individual players scoring 73, 70, and 62 points each. We're getting into scores that are 125, 130. I looked up some scores here recently, Chris, just the other day. New Orleans beat the Raptors. Raptors scored 100 points. New Orleans scored 138. Cleveland beat Sacramento 136-110. Clippers beat Atlanta. This is regulation, Chris. 149-144. And Indiana beat Houston the other night 132-129. The National the No Defense Association is what I want to call them now, rather than the National Basketball Association. I was quite perturbed a couple of weeks ago when Milwaukee let their coach go, a former assistant with the Raptors. He had a 30-13 record. I guess one of the stars didn't like the fact or the direction that the team was going in. That irked me. And then there was another play recently where one of the coaches wanted to call a timeout and the referee didn't see it, and that team wanted to protest that game. It was a funny thing noted that, well, if that coach had been dressed in a suit and tie, maybe he would have been noticed, and maybe that timeout would have been called, and we wouldn't have been suggesting a protest. I have some beefs with the NBA, obviously, Chris. It's called the No Defense Association, the NDA, here today on my 2 cents. That is our 2 cents. For Chris, I'm Gerry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.